Today on The State of Us, with gas prices guzzling, is it time to buy an electric vehicle? Welcome to The State of Us. I'm your host, Justin T. Weller, joined, of course, today by the one and only, the friendly redneck liberal, senior resident historian here at True Chat, Mr. Lance L. Jackson. And that redneck liberal part will be important today as we're talking again about electric vehicles. It's no shock, as many people are aware, that gas prices are through the roof, breaking records left and right. They've come back down a little bit here in recent weeks, but are still very high. And as the price of electric vehicles is becoming more in line with internal combustion engine vehicles, certainly there's more people out there thinking about the possibility of, would it be worth it to buy an electric vehicle? With the way gas prices are, could I get by? And what are my hesitations? What keeps me from doing it? What am I most concerned about? So that's what we're really going to be talking about today. We'll start big picture and then narrow into some anecdotal experience. But before we dive in, Lance, do we have a word of the day?
We do. It is 4 syllables. It is the word mellifluous. 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 It means sounding sweet and smooth. So the idea of EVs has a mellifluous sound to it, but is it going to actually work? And how is it working? You know, we talk all the time, but we have our gas powered cars. By God, I've got my gas station and I stop and get my cold drink or my coffee and my candy bar and I just go. But those internal combustion vehicles also had this problem when people first started driving cars that were gasoline powered. They had to buy their fuel from pharmacies and hardware stores because there was no such thing as a gas station, right? So it's kind of the chicken and the egg piece. And what do we do here, right? What do we do here? I mean, do we build the charging stations and the cars will follow, or do we have to build and buy so many cars before then the public outcry, or hey, capitalism, right? There's a profit to be made in having some EV stations out there. And so once there's a profit, then there's a business. Which way do we go?
That is the question. That's part of what we're looking at today. We've got an article linked from the Wall Street Journal entitled, "While Electric Vehicles Proliferate, Charging Stations Lag Behind." And for disclosure here of our episode, Lance, you want to tell our listeners what type of vehicle are you driving these days? What'd you roll up in today?
Oh, what I rolled up in today? Well, it's a nice big 1500 model truck with the V8 engine, lots of horsepower. But it currently is getting 22.5 miles per gallon.
And how much does it hold?
25-gallon tank.
So that's a nice pricey fill up there,
That's
right?
why I'm not pushing on the accelerator really hard and we ease up to speed and we're not speeding. And I'm
so like $115 to fill up, something like that.
Something like that, but I'm getting 22.5 miles to the gallon.
Oh,
I mean, it's been known fully loaded to drop down to around 12, 14 miles to the gallon. So I'm very happy with my 22.5 that it says on the current tank of gas that I'm earning.
And for those listening, my first 2 vehicles were both trucks. First, a small Dodge Dakota, and then followed up by a larger Silverado. And then I went to a Chevy Cruze, which for those not familiar, that is a subcompact car made by
I had one
Chevrolet.
of those.
Yes, Lance also had a
6-speed on the floor.
Right,
got to shift.
Had a Chevy Cruze.
I liked it.
And when I got rid of that, actually, what happened is husband and I both drove. He drove a Honda CR-V. I was driving a Chevy Cruze, so both gas-powered vehicles. Over the course of 2 years, we have both transitioned. There are no gas-powered vehicles in our household, so we both have Chevy Bolts the Bolt EV. So they are both 2020 model years. So that hopefully gives our listeners a perspective here on the different dynamics. Lance and I are both intimately familiar with gas-powered vehicles. Lance still an active ICE driver, while Justin is driving EVs. So hopefully it'll be good from an anecdotal standpoint and to answer some of those questions, things that I've learned over time as we talk through this.
But to sound a little more mellifluous than you did about it, I'm not anti-EVs. My big question is, okay, how can we make the EV fit my driving patterns, what I do, and where do we find this? I mean, it's wonderful. And we got into the topic because both of my millennial daughters will be buying cars soon. And we've had these discussions because they've listened to the show and have listened to us. We talked a few months ago about 4 or 5 different models of EVs and EV trucks and which ones were the best and the cost. And so, we're having those conversations in our household, and a lot of questions come up. And that's why I thought it would be good to do this show, because there are a couple of articles where the government's trying to build more EV stations, but there don't seem to be any takers. And then what's it mean if you're a traveler? How many miles a day should I travel to where it's cost effective or where it's a pain in the butt?
That's where we get into where do things stand right now, right? Because gas prices are high. You're maybe thinking about an electric vehicle, but there's hesitation, right? There's all these things that go into, as Lance pointed out, will it fit my lifestyle? Well, here's what I can tell you. You are going to have to make some lifestyle changes. Now, will those changes work out for the better? I believe the answer is yes. In my life, they have worked out positively. And just as a quick illustration breakdown to whet your appetite here, right now, what we're paying for electricity in the city of Urbana, which is approximately where Lance and I live, we have an energy aggregation program through the city, which isn't uncommon. There's a lot of cities that do that. They buy energy collectively so as to get a better rate. We pay 0.0499 cents. So about 5 cents per kilowatt hour. Okay. That's what we pay for electricity. And what does it then cost to charge the electric vehicle that I have, the Chevy Bolt? Well, here's how we figure this out, Lance, right? I have a 65 kilowatt hour battery, and we pay 0.0499 cents.
You pay a nickel
per
for
kilowatt
a kilowatt hour, so you pay $3.25 to charge it.
Exactly.
Okay. And that was done in my head for all you people out there. We have good before, back when we had to use an abacus.
Back in the day.
Yeah. Before we had calculators, we had to do that ourselves.
So
I did that all just top of my head. I didn't know those were the numbers.
So it's $3.25 to charge, basically, at home. Now that's at home, and you might immediately say, well, I don't have a way to charge at home.
Well, and you can only go, though, 200 miles on your charge.
About 250, but yes.
But when I fill up my gas tank,
correct,
I can go almost 550 miles.
Yes.
Without having to stop.
So, and we're going to compare apples to apples. So if we double that, call it $6.50, so that we're on, by the way, the average, just for people the median range for gas-powered vehicles in the United States of America is 412 miles. So if we double what the Chevy Bolt, gets on a single charge, you would be spending about $6.50 for the equivalent range in a gas vehicle. So $6.50 versus the average gas tank in an American vehicle holds 14 gallons. And if you lived in Urbana right now, because that's the energy prices we're using, so we want to compare fairly.
Right.
We're using Urbana energy prices, so we're also using Urbana gas prices. You'd be paying $4.59 a gallon for your gas. That means it would cost you $64.26 to fill up your gas vehicle. The same range electric would cost you $6.50. So 1/10 of what it would cost to fill
But I
up.
would go those 400 miles would give me 500 miles, would give me whatever the number is there, would give me 6 to 7 hours of driving time. you would drive for 3 hours and then sit for 10 hours and then try to catch up to me.
Well, if I stopped at a fast charger, I wouldn't sit that long.
But is there one available on the route from which we're taking? While you're sitting there twiddling your thumbs, I'm moving on down the road on my cross-country road trip or on my 6-hour visit to somewhere for the weekend.
And then the question comes in. This is the next one, because this is a common, question about electric vehicles. How often, Lance, are you driving 500 miles in a single drive? How many times a month?
Probably once or twice.
Okay.
Because when I visit, I'm visiting, I'm driving, a couple hundred miles one way, or, at least once a month. I would say, to be fair, not to just, argue with you, but it'd be once a month.
So if you're doing that once a month, then it'd be probably safe to say that 80 or 90% of the time you're going how far in a day?
Oh, yeah, no, on a typical day, I'm going 30 miles.
For your standard commute, a 250 mile range would be.
No, it would work for me.
You'd be able to go probably the whole week, maybe longer.
Which is why you call me, you said, well, this is, the redneck liberal today. No, I've looked at it, and because I have that, I have another vehicle, a Toyota Camry, that gets close to 42 miles to the gallon on the highway that I use anytime I'm running around town. So that's why I'm not anti-EV. I can see where, like I told you though, I bought the Camry 7 years ago because I expected it to last a couple 100,000 miles.
Right.
So I don't know that I will need an EV before my Camry gives out. But
right.
If my Camry gives out, then I would buy an EV for all the day tripping. But if you're not someone like me who decides that cars are important and I'm going to have multiple cars for one driver, if you're a one driver, one car person,
if you're more sane,
how do I then just get by with an EV only? That's my dilemma. An EV would work for me as a secondary car to run around 80% of the time. But what do I do on that once a month or twice a month that I want to go more than what my battery will take me?
We're going to talk about answering that question. Keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back. If you lived where Lance and I lived, and you were the standard American, it'd cost you about $64.26 to fill up your vehicle right now. It cost me $6.50 to fill up my car for an equivalent. Lance mentioned his Camry, which gets 42 miles to the gallon, which I'm sure a lot of you out there who drive those gas vehicles are like, wow, isn't that great? That is great, right? That's pretty good, 42 miles a gallon. Well, the government, in its benevolent wisdom that it has, said that for people to buy gas or to buy electric vehicles, they're going to need to know the efficiency equivalent of a electric vehicle to a gas vehicle. So what they released is, you frequently see on that window sticker, right, miles per gallon, MPG. Now they have on electric vehicles what's called MPGE, miles per gallon electric equivalent. Okay. So 42 miles a gallon on the Camry sounds great. What sounds better to me, though, is 110 miles per gallon with my vehicle.
Again, though, you go back to the convenience and the distant traveling.
Correct.
And we haven't discussed, and here's another question I'm going to throw at you, right? We were talking about my daughters. They both rent currently. Their rental places are not EV equipped. So if they were to buy an electric vehicle, they couldn't charge it at home. And we've been talking about home prices and pricing people out of the market, and even rental prices are going up. What do you do if you're a renter? You have a car, you make the daily commute into the city to work or whatever, but you don't have the money, or you don't want to buy a home, and you want to rent, but the people who own the rental property don't have a charger there for you. So how do you rent? How do you then charge your vehicle if you buy an EV? I mean, there's another problem when we start to say this is going to go nationwide. Is it still a stumbling block that we can't overcome? So if I'm a renter, it's like, yeah, you guys are talking about a great deal for me, but I can't do it. Or is there a solution so that if I want to save $100 per fill up,
yeah,
that I could put towards, buying my own place or whatever else to support the economy? What can I do?
Sadly, that solution, I think, is less on the individual, more on, the government and the economy and car companies. When I say the economy, we're talking about them as well, to continue to do that. A lot of the benefit is focused on homeowners right now, because that really is, if you own a home, right, you are in the very best position to benefit from owning an electric vehicle. If you commute, under 250 miles round trip in a single day, there is literally, and you own a home, if those two things are true, you should have an electric vehicle in your driveway, because with the price reduction from General Motors right now and by the way, be worth noting, this is definitely not sponsored. I just happen to own these vehicles and lived with them. And I paid more for these vehicles, by the way, because now that they're $6,000 cheaper than they were when I bought them, which is kind of frustrating. But, that's need to call them up and see if they want to send me a check for the difference here and refund me that. But the point is, right, that with where they're at now, you can get into an electric vehicle with 250 miles of range for under $30,000. If you own a home and you commute under 250 miles a day, the math tells you that if you're somebody who wants to save money, you should do this. It is a good deal. The question becomes, to Lance's point, if you don't fit those very specific criteria, then what? And when I say very specific, there's a lot of Americans, many millions, tens of millions of Americans who meet those criteria, right? Who should have an electric vehicle today, because it would just economically make the best sense for them. Forget about the environment. Now, if you care about the environment, that's a nice bonus as well, but that's not the reason to do it if you're just a dollars and cents person. To your point, Lance, about renters, though, or people that don't own their own home, this is where the government, car companies have to work together to improve charging in three places: at apartments, parking garages, and at places of business. In a tight labor market, if I drive an electric vehicle and my employer lets me charge my vehicle while I'm at work for free, my vehicle's sitting idle during the day anyway, probably, right? It's sitting there for 8 hours. Well, guess how long it takes at a level 2 charger to charge most EVs? About 8 hours. So I can drive to work, plug in, pay nothing, drive home, and I don't even need a charger at home.
Right.
And now for my commute, my day-to-day, week-to-week, I pay nothing other than for my car. That's a very, again, if you are in that situation where you have a place of work that offers that, that's a very attractive opportunity.
Or if you're an employer looking to gain some employees, it might be worth it to you to invest in five charging stations.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden you have 12 employees that want to use it. So now you bill more, and all of a sudden you have people that are staying with you. You've given them a perk, right? That's just like insurance or anything else. You're giving them something for working at your building or at your place of employment. And so it's easier to then keep people, right? And we just got done with the Great Resignation and everybody jumping jobs and jumping ship and looking for other places. It's like, well, yeah, you can make $1 or $2 more an hour over there, or you can, make another $5,000 a year over there that'll be taxed, or you can keep coming here and not make as much money, but now let's start figuring up how much you're saving in charging costs. And I mean, again.
Well, that'd be like saying, right? I mean, just so that people can do apples to apples.
So when are you putting one in out here for us? What's true chat? I want 2 because I know if there's one, you're automatically plugged in.
I'm taking it.
Yeah, so it's going to have to be at least 2.
So that you got a place.
So I have a place. Right.
Because the way to think about it, right, is if you're in the job market right now and you're looking for a job and you come across a job that says, we will pay for your gas. And there's just no caveat, just we will pay for your gas. You fill up, you swipe the company card all the time. Don't care if it's personal. We will pay for your gas. I would think, I mean, again, I don't drive a gas vehicle anymore, so I guess I can't speak to this, but I'd imagine that'd be a fairly attractive offer for somebody to be like,
might bring me out of retirement.
Right. I mean, that's interesting. So I think there's opportunities like that for workplaces. There's obviously the opportunities, same thing in the apartment world. But there has to be incentives to do it.
Your rent. Okay. Yes. You're renting, you're spending more than $1,200 a month on rent, but hey, it gets you your own charger. We have a garage space that you're renting as well. We're going to we have chargers in our garage. So if you have an electric vehicle, yes, you're going to pay a little bit more for this apartment, $1,200, $1,300, $1,400 a month. And you're saying, well, that's ridiculous. Live in the big cities, folks, right? That's not necessarily,
it's probably what you're going to pay.
Super nice place. And, but hey, part of the lease agreement, you have the option to charge an electric vehicle. To your point, it's just another. And what if the government said, well, there's this many billions of dollars for people who own rental property to put this in? I
can tell you, I mean, I'm fortunate that I live in Ohio, because Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, those 3, states in particular, when you talk about states that have a large rural population, they all have pretty good access to chargers and charging infrastructure relative to a lot of other states that are rural. So I think that's important to note, that we've benefited from that. But that's where we talk about, everybody heard about the bipartisan infrastructure deal, obviously, and there's a good bit of money in there for additional charging stations, because the Great American Road Trip is a real consideration. I think the main thing, and that's part of what we try to talk about this segment, is what is most of what you do, right? 80, 90% of what you do. What do you need a car for 80 to 90% of the time? Because if you're buying a car for the 10% of the time, that's probably not the best economic decision. Does that mean that when you go on a road trip, your road trip's going to take longer? Yes. Is that worth the savings the other 90% of the time? Economically, yes. Is it worth it to you? That's a question you have to answer. Because dollars and cents wise, the time that you're going to spend, right, sitting and waiting for your vehicle to charge, unless you are in a really, really, really high paying job, will not offset the cost savings that you will experience the rest of the time. So in other words, the inconvenience, economically speaking, is worth it. Is it worth it to you? Are you willing to be inconvenienced to wait? That will not always be the case. We're going to talk about what the future holds for some of these near term and long term right after this. Lance wants to get in his truck, go 400 or 500 miles, and then, by George, he wants to take a, maybe 15, 25-minute break, get up, stretch, fill that gas tank, maybe grab something to eat at the gas station, then he wants to keep going. Can EVs do that? Yes. Can they do it as easily as gas vehicles right now? No. It's not because the technology isn't there. And this is, I think, the important component. For example, if you look at the new Chevy Silverado EV, it'll be being released 2023, 400 plus miles range, 450 miles range, 350 kilowatt hour fast charging. Well, what does that mean? You're going to be able to probably refill at a 350 kilowatt fast charger, big caveat there, probably in about 30 minutes.
Right. If you can find one of those chargers, which are
right.
kind of like finding a nugget of gold in your backyard.
Exactly. And there are vehicles like the Hummer EV, which is a top end electric vehicle, that are going to support 850 kilowatt fast charging, which obviously is even faster. So the point is the technology component of understanding how to charge faster, right, exists. Most of the time, you shouldn't be charging fast at all because you ought to be charging at home because that's always going to be the cheapest place. Imagine if you had your own supply of gasoline and your own fill-up station at home. Where would you fill up? Well, I'd fill up at my house, of course. I mean, why would I go to a gas station if I didn't have to? Obviously, that's not the case for most people. So you would charge at home, but you need those public fast charging stations when you're taking a trip, right? When you're going further than your vehicle's range in a single day round trip. So that's where, from a government standpoint, right, from a private industry standpoint, that's where the investment has to be, is in building out along those travel corridors and locations access to ultra fast charging stations, so that we are ready for the next generation of electric vehicles. If I pulled up to a 350 kilowatt hour charger right now today, Lance, my vehicle could not make use of that. That's just how it is. My vehicle doesn't support that. So, it would charge at its maximum, but its maximum would be the maximum it could charge at, which would be like 1/4 of the capacity of the charger. What I would say is that what I've done, in the last 2 years, left the state of Ohio multiple times. And for those that don't know, Urbana's kind of in central Ohio, approximately kind of west of Columbus. But to leave the state of Ohio, you have to drive, a good ways. We're not in a place where it's like, oh, we're going to cross the state border. So when I say that, you're going, probably a minimum of 80 miles, to cross a state line. And realistically, you can only go one direction and go 80 miles. Most of the time,
it's more like 120 miles from where we are to cross the state line.
So I have been to Southern Kentucky twice. I've been to Detroit, I think 4 times, Detroit, Michigan. We've been to Cincinnati, I don't know how many times, which for reference is about 100 miles from us one way, so 200-mile round trip. So we've been a good bit of places. Now, do we travel as much as Lance? No. We've also been camping during that time twice. So in 2 years, right, we've made a number of road trips. Now, are we big road trip? No. But we do some of those. Also, we didn't drive to Florida or something like that either.
To your point, by driving, and this is where, my money mind starts to work, right? And that is, well, if I drive an EV for 80% of the time and I'm saving all this money on gasoline, if I would, every time I charge, put that money in the bank that I would have spent on gasoline, then I've got my airline tickets to Florida. I've got my airline tickets to Alaska. That's the point, is that you buy the EV and you're saving so much money if you're, and I don't want to use the word smart, but if you then save that money. If you're
cost conscious.
Instead of just spending it, right? Because what most people do is, oh, well, I'm saving money on gasoline. Now I'm going to eat out more. I'm going to go to the movies more. I'm going to go to the ball game more. I'm going to spend that money. If you didn't spend that money, then since you don't have the vehicle that can road trip, you could afford the higher priced airlines, renting a car once you got to your location so that you could then travel around since you don't have your vehicle with you. You could afford that off of your savings from using your EV 80% of the time. That's the point I think that Justin's trying to make that makes sense. You can still travel and you can actually pay for it out of your gas savings if you are so inclined to spend your savings that way.
Well, and just to be clear, you don't have to fly. I mean,
and you can help the planet in the meantime.
If I wanted to, right, from where we are right here in Ohio, I've looked at this a few times. If we wanted to, I could go to Florida, which I've made that drive, by the way, before, but I haven't yet made it in an electric vehicle. I've made it a number of times in different gas vehicles. But you could go from Ohio to Florida along, any of the interstates that a regular human being would take. They're, going that route. You could make that drive in an electric vehicle. Would it take longer? Sure, of course, but you can still make the drive. Likewise, Brett and I have talked about going out west to Yellowstone. It's been a long time since I've been there, and I'd like to go again. And can we go in the cars that we have? Is that something we can do? And the answer is yes. You can make it all the way to Yellowstone National Park and charge at Yellowstone National Park, by the way, in an electric vehicle from the state of Ohio, which is like, round trip. It's like 4,000 miles or something. And
every couple hundred miles, you can stop and take 8 hours to recharge. And go another 4 hours and then stop and recharge.
I am referring to sticking with primarily fast charging, but yes, you're still gonna add, folks. I mean, you're still gonna add hours to your trip.
Well, you're not gonna get 250 miles because I know how much you like air conditioning. You're not gonna, just a spoiler alert there, folks. When you read your EV and how many miles you can go, that's if the windows are rolled down and you're not playing the radio and you don't have on the air conditioning or the heater in the winter. Then you can get that just like your car, right? Yeah. Just like I said, I'm babying my truck to get 22 and a half, miles to the gallon.
Right.
If I drove it the way I'd like to drive it, I'm down to around 15 or 16.
Yeah, you're not pedal to the metal out of the drive every time.
Exactly. So the way you drive your EV, gets you that optimal distance. And so for most people, you will not get the optimal, just like you don't in your gas powered vehicle. So
I have found most of the time with the way that I drive, without making many changes to it and running the climate, like I have not drastically changed my comfort level in a car. You know what I mean? Because I don't have to, right? Because I live, my commute, much like Lance, is very short. I run around town, run a few miles outside of town, run back into town. I run around a lot, but I don't go very far, I mean, I'm probably doing, like Lance said, maybe.
And we don't have big traffic jams here in Urbana where you're sitting idling for 30 minutes at a time and going 2 miles.
So, those things are not huge.
Unless you stop at the local McDonald's, then you might.
Then you're going to be sitting
the drive-through. You may sit for a half an hour. To get
so much for
to get your sandwich,
food, right?
Yes, that's an oxymoron here in Urbana. There is no such thing as fast food.
No, there's not,
unless you shoot a deer.
Right. Yeah, that'd be faster than going through the
deer moves fast, and that's the equivalent of fast food here in Urbana.
Anyway, so that's kind of where I guess what I'm saying is we've made road trips, right? It is still possible to make road trips. I mean, it's not like there aren't chargers, right? There's just not as many, and we've talked about that. There's not as many as there could be to make it more convenient, and there's not enough fast chargers to make the traditional American road trip as convenient as one would like. Now, can you spend the money right now today, purchase a vehicle, have it within the next year that can charge very fast, very comparable to, your typical road trip stop? If money's no object, you can do that. But part of what we've been talking about this episode is for the regular American who's got some kind of cost-conscious nature, should you be buying an electric vehicle? And I think that goes back to that fundamental question of what is your mission with your, car? And you might say, well, that's a weird way to.
And if you're a homeowner.
I
mean, that's the takeaway that I have from all the mellifluous voices that I've heard from you today.
Yes.
Is that if I own a home, this is pretty much a no-brainer.
Correct.
Because the other way that my logistic mind works, the savings I have not going to gasoline would help me make that car payment. Not all of it, but probably a third to half of it.
If people drive as much as you do, it might, Well, because that's the other.
But if it's going to make the car payment, then I don't have money left to fly to Disney.
That's right.
Or to Alaska.
Yeah.
You can't, well, I'm saving money to make the car payment and to do this no, you're not saving that much money. But,
it'd be nice if you were.
But you could pay a bill or two or save for a big trip.
Yeah.
Off of your savings.
Well,
another
might not,
way of looking at it.
The other thing we didn't mention in this is I'm a homeowner that has solar, so I don't pay 44 cents per kilowatt hour to charge because much of our electricity is generated ourselves.
Yeah, we're not trying to sell to you people that are doing all
Right.
those things. We're just trying to say, I like your
trying
point.
to hack the
I was
system,
trying to give
Lance.
you some props, right? Which I don't usually do.
No.
That if you own a home,
You were being very mellifluous to me.
I was, and I'm
With
not
your
usually
words.
that way.
No.
And especially when it comes to you. But you did a good job of selling the idea. If you own a home and drive less than 200 miles a day round trip, you should be in an electric vehicle.
Yes, that's the conclusion. If you don't meet those criteria, I would be keeping a close eye on things and looking into, is there a place near you that has a charger? Is there a workplace near you or a garage near you that has a charger? Because those may open the door to that for you. It's not quite a no-brainer if you're not in that situation. But yes, I think that's the conclusion that we can tell people, Lance, right? Today is you can go buy an electric vehicle and you can be saving money tomorrow if you own a home and you drive less than 200 miles on, 9 out of 10 days.
They're going to sell you the car cheaper. They're going to set up your charger for you. And all you got to do is drive. Drive and plug. Drive and plug.
I mean, I have not been to a gas station in over a year. I turned around at Speedway the other day.
Oh.
I drove into Speedway to turn around to go back the other direction.
They shouldn't allow people like you to turn around. You shouldn't be allowed to use the property.
I didn't stop.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I was, tearing up their pavement, wearing it out.
Think of all the money you're saving in candy bars and chips and sodas.
Oh,
and
I do.
breakfast
I'm
sandwiches,
healthier for
right?
it.
There you go.
Because that's what do? You're filling up and you stroll inside and they get you to buy something you didn't need that wasn't any good for your health, or spend way too much on a cup of coffee or a soda or something else, which is good business for them, but not great for your pocketbook. And we didn't even factor in
But remember,
those
those things didn't used to exist until after there were internal combustion cars. So the likelihood of us seeing charging stations starting to pop up is sooner rather than later, I think.
All of these questions we're asking, Lance, right, were the same questions when cars were coming of age, gas-powered cars. There were lots of skeptical people out there. It can't be better than a horse. It can't be. And here's why. These 10 reasons. Where the heck am I going to buy this stupid thing called gasoline? How am I going to? And now we think about, well, gasoline's everywhere. There's no problem with that, So
it'll be here before we know it.
It'll be here
hopefully in my lifetime, which if you guys are regular listeners, that, that could be pretty quick.
Why we do this show today, Lance?
Well, because we have a mission here at True Chat, and that is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. And hopefully you've enjoyed it today, probably on your way to work or on your way home, and you can share it with your people at work and maybe ask your boss, hey, why don't you put in a charging station out there? And then tell them, I heard this idea. It was a great idea. And, put in the suggestion box at work. And you can tell them you heard it on Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, and everywhere podcasts are found.
The State of Us is available Tuesdays and Thursdays, first thing in the morning as a podcast. That's when you get new episodes. And then we're also heard those same episodes on the weekends, AM and FM radio stations across the country. Lance takes the victory today.
3-1.
That's right. But I did get one in.
You got one in. I was proud of you.
I did. Found a spot. For the State of Us, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Special thanks to producer Bradley Butch. Thank you all, our audience, for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.